2 million years ago, Africa was a battlefield not of armies and weapons, but of teeth, claws, and survival. The land was alive with predators larger and stronger than anything Homo habilis, the handyman, could ever hope to match in raw power. Yet in this harsh world, among lions with saber-like teeth, crocodiles longer than canoes, and hyenas with bone-crushing jaws, a fragile spark of humanity flickered. That spark was Homo habilis. They were small, barely over 4 feet tall, with long arms better for climbing than fighting, and brains only half the size of ours. To the beasts of the savanna they were prey, nothing more than flesh to tear apart. But inside their minds was the beginning of something different, something that no claw or fang could match: ingenuity. The world they inhabited. The African plains stretched endlessly, golden grasslands broken by thorny acacia trees, rivers teeming with crocodiles, and distant mountains whose shadows swallowed entire valleys. Here, life was unforgiving. Herds of antelope thundered across the land, pursued by giant cats. Buzzards circled overhead, waiting for the weak to fall. In this world, Homo habilis was fragile. They lacked speed, strength, and natural weapons, but they had curiosity. They had hands that could grasp and shape, and they had the courage to push deeper into a world filled with monsters. Every step outside their shelter carried risk. A rustle in the grass could mean death. The night was worse, shadows full of unseen eyes, growls echoing beyond the fireless dark. The first tool's stone. That was their salvation. Where claws and teeth failed, stone gave them a chance. By striking one rock against another, they discovered edges sharp enough to cut flesh, scrape hides, and crack open bones for the rich marrow inside. It was not just survival. It was transformation. For the first time, these fragile beings had a weapon, a tool that gave them power over carcasses left behind by predators, a way to turn scraps into sustenance. But making stone tools was loud, echoing across the plains. The sharp cracks of stone on stone carried through the air, drawing attention. And sometimes, predators came to investigate. Predators in the grass. Imagine it, a small group of Homo habilis crouched low around a half-eaten carcass. Buzzards scream above, the stench of blood thick in the air. The handyman chips away at bones with his new tool, hands trembling with hunger. And then, silence. The wind stops. The savanna holds its breath. From the grass, 2 golden eyes appear. A saber-tooth. Muscles ripple under its coat as it creeps closer, each step silent as death. The Homo habilis freeze. Their hearts pound. They have no fire, no spears, only sharp stones and shaking hands. Against such a beast, escape is the only hope. But even running is a gamble. One stumble, one misstep, and the cat would strike. Its fangs could pierce skulls. Its claws could tear flesh apart in a heartbeat. So they did what no animal had done before. They stood together. One shouted, a raw, trembling cry. Another waved their arms, trying to appear larger. They hurled stones, not with skill, but with desperation. And for a moment, the predator hesitated. That hesitation saved them. The price of survival. Not all were so lucky. Many of their kind fell in the jaws of predators. Children, the weakest, were most at risk. Families mourned in silence, unable to fight back against nature's fury. But even in loss, there was learning. They began to understand the value of group survival. That alone they were nothing, but together they stood a chance. And so, slowly, painfully, Homo habilis adapted. They moved in tighter groups. They watched the savanna not just with fear, but with strategy. They began to sense patterns, knowing when lions hunted, where crocodiles lurked, and which paths to avoid. The spark of change. Though fire was still beyond their reach, the dream of it haunted them. They had seen it. Lightning striking dry grass, flames devouring the land, predators scattering in fear. They understood deep down that fire meant safety, warmth, power. But for now, they only had stone. And stone was enough to begin rewriting their destiny. As the sun set, painting the plains in blood-red light. The handyman's tribe huddled together in the dark, the night filled with growls and the snapping of jaws in the distance. Above, the stars burned bright, watching silently as humanity's story began its long and brutal climb. The night deepened. The fire's glow flickered against the rocks, sending shadows dancing across the cavern walls. For Homo erectus, this was no longer just an accident of nature. It was the lifeline of survival, and it was slowly becoming part of their identity. But with fire came new questions, new risks. Would it always obey them? Or could it betray them if it raged out of control? The clan sat huddled, their faces bathed in a warm orange glow. Sparks rose upward, vanishing into the dark sky like tiny souls escaping into the heavens. Mothers pulled their young closer, whispering in sounds not yet words but filled with meaning. Safety, warmth, togetherness. Fathers stood guard, sharp stones in hand, watching the shadows at the edge of the firelight. Beyond that invisible circle of protection, eyes gleamed. Lions, hyenas, leopards. They paced in frustration, unwilling to step into the light, growling low as though they could sense their supremacy was slipping away. For the first time, early humans were no longer prey cowering in silence. Fire had flipped the balance. Still, fire was a fragile ally. When the flames grew small, panic rippled through the clan. They scrambled, feeding it dry twigs, bark, leaves, anything that would burn. Some nights, when the fire nearly died, terror returned. What if it went out? What if they couldn't find another lightning strike to rekindle it? This fear drove them to learn, to experiment. At first, their attempts were clumsy, rubbing sticks together until their palms blistered, striking stones until sparks leapt, only to fizzle into darkness. Yet every failure taught them something. Which wood was drier, which rocks made brighter sparks, how to shelter embers from wind. It was a long, brutal education. But then, one evening, a young Homo erectus struck 2 stones with frustration. A spark landed on a tuft of dry grass. This time, instead of fading, it glowed. The clan froze. The youth bent down, blowing softly, eyes wide. Slowly, the grass ignited. Flames rose, fragile, trembling, yet alive. For the first time, fire was not stolen from the sky. It was made. The tribe erupted with cries of awe. They danced, stomping around the flames, hands raised to the heavens as if calling to unseen spirits. The youth's name, lost to history, was likely remembered for generations. A pioneer of survival, a master of fire, fire and food. With fire came transformation. Meat that was once tough and dangerous to chew softened over flame. Bones cracked easier, marrow sucked out with less effort. Parasites, once the silent killers of raw flesh, burned away in the heat. The clan grew stronger, their bellies fuller, their children healthier. Homo erectus teeth changed over generations, smaller, more refined. Their guts shrank, needing less time to digest tough raw plants. Their brains expanded, fueled by richer calories. Fire wasn't just a tool, it was evolution itself, reshaping their very bodies. They learned to cook roots until they softened, to roast seeds until bitterness turned to sweetness, to warm water until it steamed. The discovery was not just survival, it was culture. Around the fire, they told stories in gestures and sounds, passing knowledge, building bonds. This was the beginning of something larger, community. The rivalry of fire. But not every clan discovered fire at the same time. For those who hadn't, the nights were longer, colder, more dangerous. And so, rivalries grew. Some groups attacked others just for fire. Skirmishes broke out under moonlight, stones and wooden clubs swinging, blood staining the dirt, all for a handful of burning branches. Fire became treasure. Fire became war. The victorious clans carried glowing embers carefully inside hollowed bones or wrapped in bark, protecting them as though protecting life itself. To lose it was to step back into darkness. For tens of thousands of years, this fragile mastery defined survival. The language of sparks. Imagine the first sparks of language born around flames. Mothers calling to their children not just with cries, but with shaped sounds. Hunters grunting toward one another, pointing, mimicking the prowl of lions, the rush of stampeding beasts. Fire gave them time. Time to plan, to imagine, to speak. Those sounds grew into proto-words, proto-sentences, and with each flame-fed night, minds sharpened. Memory grew longer, imagination stretched farther. Around fire, humans were not just surviving the present, they were inventing the future. The fire rituals. In caves and open plains, evidence remains of charred bones, fire pits, and blackened stones. Archaeologists believe fire was not only practical, but sacred. Some Homo erectus may have believed fire held spirits, that the crackling embers whispered voices of ancestors, that sparks rising were souls ascending. They may have feared that angering fire meant losing its gift. This reverence was the seed of ritual, of belief, of the first spiritual systems that would later shape Homo sapiens. The test of storms. Yet even fire could betray them. Storms drenched their flames, leaving them shivering in the cold. Lightning struck too far, or not at all. Entire clans perished in freezing rains, unable to rekindle their spark. But those who endured, who sheltered flames in caves, who fed it carefully with patience, grew stronger. They passed their skills to the next generation. One by one, clan after clan, fire mastery spread. Outro hook, leading into next episode. And so, fire became more than survival. It was evolution, culture, belief, and war. It reshaped the bodies and minds of Homo erectus, pushing them closer to becoming us. But fire was only the beginning. Soon, humans would sharpen stone into weapons, bones into tools, and begin to carve their mark on the world. The question remains, did fire make us human? Or were we already human, reaching out desperately for the flames that would prove it? The story does not end here. The journey from flickering sparks to blazing civilizations has only just begun. The fire burned steady now. The clan had learned its rhythms, how to feed it, how to shelter it, how to use it. But fire alone was not enough. Beyond the light, the world was still dangerous. The lions still prowled. The mammoths still thundered across the plains. The rivers still swelled, drowning those who dared cross. If Homo erectus was to thrive, not just survive, they needed more. They needed weapons. At first, they used what nature gave them: sticks, stones, bones. But these were crude, blunt, often failing at the moment of desperation. Still, instinct drove them to improve. When one stone was sharper than another, it cut better. When one stick was hardened in fire, it pierced deeper. And so began the first technology. The stone breaker. One day, perhaps by accident, a stone split against another. The edges were sharp, gleaming under the sun like the fangs of predators. A curious hand reached out, touching the edge, blood welled from a cut. Pain, but also revelation. The clan gathered, watching as flakes flew from stone after stone. With practice, they learned to shape them intentionally: hand axes, cutting edges, scraping tools. These tools were not as deadly as a lion's claw, but they gave humans something no beast had: choice. With sharp stones, they could cut hides, butcher meat quickly before scavengers arrived, dig roots from hard earth, carve wood into spears. Suddenly, their world expanded. Every tool was a small victory against nature. The hunt begins. At first, Homo erectus were scavengers. They trailed after predators, waiting for lions or hyenas to leave scraps. But scraps could only sustain so many. Hunger forced them to risk more. They began to coordinate. Around the fire, they grunted and gestured, mimicking movements. They pointed to the plains, to the herds that thundered in the distance. The hunt was born not just of desperation, but of imagination. The first hunts were clumsy, dangerous. Spears broke, prey escaped, hunters were injured. But each failure taught them. Slowly, they learned to drive animals into ravines, to surround them, to strike in unison. For the first time, the hunters became the hunted no more. The meat they brought back fed not just bodies but minds. Around fire, the clan feasted, stronger than ever before. And with each successful hunt, they grew bolder, The mammoth trial. Imagine the scene. A herd of mammoths grazing on the open steppe, massive and untouchable. Yet hunger gnawed at the clan and boldness pushed them forward. They approached, fire-hardened spears in hand, nerves tight, hearts pounding. The wind carried their scent, the mammoths stirred, and suddenly chaos erupted. Trumpeting roars shook the earth, dust filled the air, and the hunters sprinted, dodging tusks that could crush them flat. Some fell. Others pressed forward. Spears flew, blood flowed. Hours later, when the dust settled, one mammoth lay still, its lifeblood seeping into the soil. It was a victory unlike any before. Weeks of food, hides for warmth, bones for tools. But it came at a cost. The clan mourned those who did not rise from the ground. Victory and loss became bound together in the dance of survival. The whisper of intelligence. With every tool chipped from stone, every hunt strategized, Homo erectus brains swelled in capacity. No other creature on Earth was doing this. Predators had strength, speed, claws, fangs. But humans had thought. Thought gave them patience. Patience gave them invention. Invention gave them power. And so, under the vast African skies, stone tools became the weapons that would one day conquer the world. Outro hook for part 3. But tools alone could not solve everything. Hunger was constant. Clans rivaled one another. Droughts came, forcing migrations across deadly lands. And as they spread, they met not only predators, but other humans. The next chapter is not just about survival against nature. It's about survival against each other. Part 4 script, 20,000 characters, clans, rivalries, and the birth of belief. The fire crackled, sparks rising into the endless night. The clan huddled close, their bellies filled from the hunt. Yet beyond their circle, other fires flickered on the horizon. Other humans. Not all meetings were peaceful. Some ended with cautious exchanges, gestures of food, flint, or companionship. Others ended with screams, stones flying, bodies falling. For in those days, to meet strangers was to gamble with life. The age of rivalries had begun. The battle for fire, one clan's fire was another clan's envy. Embers carried in bark could be stolen. Flames could be fought over like treasure. Picture two groups facing one another, shadows dancing in firelight, weapons raised. The first scream pierced the night, and then chaos. Stones hurled, wooden spears thrust, men and women grappling in the dirt. Firelight illuminated faces twisted in rage and fear. The victors left with flames held high, their own fire pits roaring brighter. The defeated slunk into darkness, their nights colder, their future uncertain. Fire was no longer just survival. It was power, the seeds of belief. Yet even as they fought, something else stirred. In the quiet moments when the flames whispered and shadows stretched, early humans began to wonder. Why did lightning bring fire? Why did sparks leap from stone? Why did the flames dance like living things? Some believed fire carried spirits. Some saw ancestors in the sparks that drifted upward, as though their dead rose into the night sky. Others believed fire could be angered, could abandon them if disrespected. These whispers of belief were the first seeds of spirituality, the earliest roots of religion. Around the fire, Homo erectus were not only hunters and fighters, they were dreamers. The long journeys. Driven by hunger, drought, and curiosity, clans began to move. Step by step, they left the African cradle, crossing rivers, climbing mountains, braving deserts. Fire lit their way. Tools guarded their lives. Some perished in snow and ice, their flames extinguished by cruel winds. Others pressed on, finding new lands, new prey, new dangers. Wherever they went, they carried fire. It became the symbol of humanity itself, the light in the darkness, the warmth against the cold. Love, loss, and legacy. Not every night was filled with blood or hunger. Around the fire, bonds deepened. Mothers rocked infants by the glow. Hunters sang their victories with guttural chants. Grief was shared when clan members died, their bodies sometimes burned, perhaps as offerings to the fire itself. From these bonds grew something profound, the sense of us. The recognition that survival was not just individual, but collective. This was the spark of society. Outro hook for Part 4. And so, from flickering embers rose tools, hunts, wars, migrations, and belief. Homo erectus stood taller, thought deeper, dreamed wider. But their story was not the end. Other humans walked the earth: Neanderthals, Denisovans, and eventually, Homo sapiens. Each carried fire, each carried ambition, and soon they would clash. The next chapter is not just about fire or tools, it's about which humans would inherit the earth. The fire crackled, sparks rising into the endless night. The clan huddled close, their bellies filled from the hunt. Yet beyond their circle, other fires flickered on the horizon. Other humans. Not all meetings were peaceful. Some ended with cautious exchanges, gestures of food, flint, or companionship. Others ended with screams, stones flying, bodies falling. For in those days, to meet strangers was to gamble with life. The age of rivalries had begun. The battle for fire, one clan's fire was another clan's envy. Embers carried in bark could be stolen. Flames could be fought over like treasure. Picture two groups facing one another, shadows dancing in firelight, weapons raised. The first scream pierced the night, and then chaos. Stones hurled, wooden spears thrust, men and women grappling in the dirt. Firelight illuminated faces twisted in rage and fear. The victors left with flames held high, their own fire pits roaring brighter. The defeated slunk into darkness, their nights colder, their future uncertain. Fire was no longer just survival. It was power. The seeds of belief. Yet even as they fought, something else stirred. In the quiet moments when the flames whispered and shadows stretched, early humans began to wonder. Why did lightning bring fire? Why did sparks leap from stone? Why did the flames dance like living things? Some believed fire carried spirits. Some saw ancestors in the sparks that drifted upward, as though their dead rose into the night sky. Others believed fire could be angered, could abandon them if disrespected. These whispers of belief were the first seeds of spirituality, the earliest roots of religion. Around the fire, Homo erectus were not only hunters and fighters, they were dreamers, the long journeys. Driven by hunger, drought, and curiosity, clans began to move. Step by step, they left the African cradle, crossing rivers, climbing mountains, braving deserts. Fire lit their way. Tools guarded their lives. Some perished in snow and ice, their flames extinguished by cruel winds. Others pressed on, finding new lands, new prey, new dangers. Wherever they went, they carried fire. It became the symbol of humanity itself, the light in the darkness, the warmth against the cold. Love, loss, and legacy. Not every night was filled with blood or hunger. Around the fire, bonds deepened. Mothers rocked infants by the glow. Hunters sang their victories with guttural chants. Grief was shared when clan members died. Their bodies sometimes burned, perhaps as offerings to the fire itself. From these bonds grew something profound, the sense of us, the recognition that survival was not just individual, but collective. This was the spark of society. Outro hook for Part 4. And so, from flickering embers rose tools, hunts, wars, migrations, and belief. Homo erectus stood taller, thought deeper, dreamed wider. But their story was not the end. Other humans walked the earth, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and eventually, Homo sapiens. Each carried fire. Each carried ambition. And soon, they would clash. The next chapter is not just about fire or tools. It's about which humans would inherit the earth.